Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, no matter what time of day it is for you across this world. We want to welcome you to today's episode of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. And if you've tuned in today, I promise you that this is going to be one heck of a conversation we're getting ready to have. So, Cheryl, let's start with you. What would you say about what you're anticipating, what we're going to cover in today's session?
Well, if you are like I am that should have learned a lot more years ago and taken a lot better steps and knowing the knowledge that I should have known, and brought it forward, I think today's going to take people back a few steps and bring them back to reality.
I really do. Brandy, what will be your overall impression of what we're getting ready to do today? Because all three of us are really excited about what we're going to be doing today.
Yeah, I'm just really excited about the person that we'll be talking with today. I've known him for a little while now, and he's just such a great person and has a really interesting background. So I'm very excited to hear a little bit more about that. And he's just extremely knowledgeable in our industry.
It really is. And this is a book that I wrote some years ago as a collaborative effort. It was the first book that I ever worked on. And the title of it is, If You Could Only Share One Piece of Advice, what would it be? And here's what we said. And I wrote a chapter, and it was about the magic moment in our life. So today we have a guest. His name is Bob Ferrari. And Bob has been called the most interesting man in the chimney sweep industry by John Meredith. And this, I will guarantee you that today, Bob is going to share with you some thoughts and processes that's really, because this is all going to be what Bob would tell his younger self if he could go back in time and do that. So hang on with us. We're going to play the intro music. We'll get Babe back right back with you in just a second. And we are back with Mr. Bob Ferrari. Had to switch positions. Brandy, you came up in the big screen. Had to put you down there in the lower corner in that lower right-hand corner. So, Bob, I really appreciate you taking your time out of your day today there in California. So let's start with the following. Tell us a little bit about Bob Ferrari. You have one heck of a life that led up to you getting in the chimney service industry, which probably taught you a lot of what we're going to talk about today. But let's share with folks a little bit about Bob Ferrari's background.
Well, my background prior to chimneys, which I got into in 1984, golly, I'm an old man, so where do you start? Through the 60s, I was involved heavily in drugs. In 1970, I converted to Christianity on Maui, studying Eastern religions and things. I came out of that, lived on a commune in East Texas. We were moving the commune from the country to Dallas to do more urban work with people. And Marina, my wife, came out with some guy to rent the ranch that we lived on. And so I stole her. And 5 weeks later, we got married. We're still married now, over 50 years. My family did take bets on how long that would last. Nobody bet over 8 months. So I'm still trying to collect. That's a pretty good payout. And we started our family. We ended up in Redding, California. We had been in Mammoth Lakes. We left. We didn't want to work in Dallas after a bit, so we came out west again because I'm from California. She's from Texas. It was a bad year in 1973. That you remember the oil crisis and everything else, and high unemployment and everything. And the jobs we had in Mammoth Lakes all fell through. Mammoth Lakes is a resort community, a big ski area in the mountains. We'd lived there a couple of years, started a church there. And all the jobs I had lined up fell through. And we found out she was pregnant with our first child, which was Hosh. And we decided that the only other thing we thought about doing was going backpacking for the whole summer. So we don't necessarily make decisions like a lot of other people. And so we took off, and the most remote place we could see that was within reach was up in Northern California, Northwest California. And we hitchhiked up there with 2 dogs and 2 backpacks. I had a 120-pound pack, which was nearly as much as I weighed. And by then she was about 4 months pregnant. We planned on staying in the mountains a couple months and then maybe hitchhiking north someplace and settling down, because once we had a child, we wanted to start having a more stable life. I had spent 3 years hitchhiking around more or less prior to that. So we lived cheap. I mean, when I lived on Maui, I lived an entire year on $250, including flying to Hawaii and back. So we didn't really have much of a plan. We were out in the mountains about a month, had to come out and see a doctor for some kind of infection related to the pregnancy that Marina got. The nearest one was in Redding, California. We hitchhiked there. It was 26% unemployment. And here we are, 48 years later, still here.
And you know, Bob, it's an interesting story when you look at what you did, because I know there was a couple of years ago that you and Marina found out that you really didn't have a legal marriage, and y'all actually went back to Texas. I'm sure I forgot what part it was, but you went back to make her an honest woman many years later. Is that a true story?
It is. So yeah, my children said they're finally legitimate, and they're so happy about that. Yeah, we knew about 15 or so years into the marriage that the preacher never turned in the paper, the final paper. They had the application and all of that stuff, but they never got the final paper that they're supposed to sign. And so, yeah, it didn't matter. We were like, whatever, it's just a piece of paper. We know we said the words, we made the promises, and we're living them out. And that's all that really mattered to us until it came time to get Social Security and look into that. And Social Security, I mean, in California, you can marry your dog. There's no rules, But for Social Security, you had to have that piece of paper, or if something happened, if I died, Marina would get nothing. So I just said, well, we have to deal with this. And the only way, they had an informal wedding in Houston. You could just go there, fill out the paper, and they gave it to you. And so I called California, that was the county here, and said, hey, do you have something where we can get married without a service or anything? And they checked and they said, well, yes, you could, except that you're already married. And I go, well, that's the problem. We're not married. And he said, well, you are married. You just don't have the paper. So you need to go to Texas to get it. And I said, so I shouldn't have told you my story. And he said, you'd be lying on an official document. And I said, well, I wouldn't really have a problem with that. And that really upset the bureaucrat. And I knew Marina wouldn't go for it either. So I just said, let's go. We're going out to Houston and we're getting married. And we went out and did the informal thing. But the guy said, this is only acceptable in 9 states. And I said, I don't care about the states. I just care about federal government. And he said, well, I think it's good for that. But if you want to be absolutely sure, you should go down to a judge downtown. And there's a few of them. You have to have a 72-hour waiting period after declaring in Texas. But a few of them are able to waive that. And I'm like, well, we're only out here for one reason, and that's to take care of this. So let's go. So we drove downtown, got a little judge, said, well, it'll be $50 cash. And it sounded cheap to me. So I married her. I've married her 3 times, twice in one day.
Well, you probably, that's a good one. And I'm glad you finally made an honest woman, I recall, and your children are no longer illegitimate. That's pretty good. So Cheryl, let's start with you. What kind of questions would you ask Mr. Ferrari about some of the wisdom he could share? And Bob, so you know, we've had a lot of people come on that are friends of yours saying hello. Sean Kramer, Julie Dent, Lee Roth, and I got a Facebook user. So we got a lot of people watching us right now, looking forward to this broadcast. So Cheryl, the floor is yours, sweetie. Turn your mic on, Cheryl.
I just wanted to say you've lived through stuff people have not even thought about yet. Okay. So you hiked, you've got a 4-month pregnant lady, you're out there and you don't know exactly where you're going or what's going to happen. So, okay, part of our thing today is what would you have done different if you knew now what was going to happen?
Well, I was thinking about that over the past week, and I thought, well, mostly I'm pretty satisfied with my life. I mean, I did lots of stupid things. I survived them. And now they simply become part of my experience. Not that I would recommend that people do them, but one of my qualities is risk-taking. And I've been always kind of known for a person who takes risks or who is perceived to take risks. But when I was thinking about it, a lot of my risk-taking is based on being lazy. And it's easier just to take the risk than it is to actually come up with a plan and make something happen. So all of us as small business people are usually pretty, we're willing to embrace risk to a certain extent. We do it maybe in a little bit different ways, but if you can't tolerate risk, you ought to not be in business for yourself. But at the same time, as a risk taker, I mean, I've led and put together expeditions to Alaska and to Central Asia and things like that, where it's perceived high risk, but we are really planning things all the way out. But in a whole lot of other ways, I just don't. And a lot of it just has to do with laziness. And if I went back and talked to my younger self, I would say, you just need to pay attention to your intentionality. So what you're doing here, make sure it's not just laziness or you don't feel like dealing with it right now, but that this is what you intend to make happen.
Gotcha. Cheryl, that answer your question?
It did.
Okay, so Brandy, your turn. You got the floor. What would you like to know from this rich history of Mr. Ferrari?
Well, the history tells us why he's the most interesting man in this chimney sweep world. So I love it. And I'd forgotten the part about you and Marina only dating like 5 weeks. I'd forgotten that part of the story. So I think that's great. So tell us, so you get to California, what happens next? Do you start chimneys right away? Do you do something else?
No, that we got here in 1973, it was 26% unemployment here in Redding at that time. So it wasn't like there were jobs happening. And I had 0 jobs experience. So if you needed somebody who could hitchhike around, who could eat out of garbage cans, who could live on nothing, who could hustle and hassle, and then I was your man. But if you needed somebody who knew how to fix something, I didn't know anything. I didn't know how to fix a car. I didn't know how to build. And my friends got out of high school and, they'd work for construction, or they'd start learning a trade, or they went to college. And I didn't do any of those things. It just wasn't interesting to me. I always loved learning, but I never liked school, if that makes sense. And so it was hard to fit into a system like that. But the benefit of that was I did anything at all for any amount of money. And in that process, this is, of course, way before you could see how to do something on YouTube or anything like that. And I learned how to do things. And I learned how to do a whole lot of things. And as the chimney sweep trade is a Swiss Army knife of trades, that really eventually helped me when it came time to become a chimney sweep. I had learned how to fix stuff, how to look at it, see the problem, create a path of organization to understand how to approach it. And then I learned how to fix. I did electrical and plumbing and all kinds of different things like you need to do as a chimney sweep.
Okay.
I think that's wonderful.
Okay, so Bob, here's my next question, and I'm going to take you back to a phone conversation that you and I had about 11 years ago, because what you had done, You were the only person in this industry that had ever hired a coach, and you had hired Eleanor and Al Levy to work with you as from a coaching aspect. And part of this was I was getting ready to launch my own career in coaching. And I called you to find out, tell me more why you did this. But one of the things you shared with me that I think is extremely valuable to share with people was that what they had taught you was that you had to become a trainer, that in order for you to move to the level that you were going to go to, you were going to have to become a trainer of people because you're going to have turnovers, new people coming in all the time. So what advice would you give our people about becoming a trainer of your people that work for you?
Well, in my younger son, I became a good chimney technician. So if we went out into the world here, and from the time I began to learn and study and pursue knowledge in the chimney industry immediately, and I wanted to be really good at what I was doing. There's nothing worse than walking into a house and, trying to bullshit your way into through whatever it is that's going on there. And I became a good technician, and I could fix things, and I could troubleshoot, and I could understand, and I could inspect. But I was a terrible businessman. And some of that had to do with my laziness, and some of it, there was a point in my life where I was really proud of being non-acquisitive. I wasn't attached to those awful material things. And it was sort of like God whispered in my ear one day and said, the only reason you're not attached to anything is you don't have anything to be attached to. and it was just boom. Okay, that's true. It's the truth. I don't have anything. I don't even know how. So I didn't know how to manage money. I didn't know how to manage things. I never really spent any time doing that. And so in running my business, I could go out and fix things, but really, if I went back and told my younger self something, I go, you better learn about money, because the whole scoring card is on money. And if you get to the end of the month and there's not any left, what's going on? And I understood that I really needed to become a businessman. And first there was a mixed group that I was in for quite a number of years, and those guys all really helped me. They started making me look at my business differently, and just spending those 5-6 days a year on my business at one of their businesses, or having them out here to help me, really was transformative. But I got to the place that I felt I needed more than peer counseling. And the way I thought about it is that I've been a mountain guide, I've been a whitewater guide. If you go into the wilderness with me, you should probably do what I say, because I've been there before. And I needed somebody like that in business. I needed somebody who wasn't just my peer and had words of wisdom for me, but somebody who'd already been there, already been successful, and could take me further. And in the end, I was one of the fortunate people to hire Al and Elle both at one time. And Al was the systems guy, and Ellen was the financial girl, and she's brilliant. He's brilliant. And I spent, it would cost me, I don't know, $25,000, $30,000 a year to hire those people. And I would do it again. I'd do it for double that. It transformed me as a business person. It transformed my business. It took me from $250,000 a year of gross sales to, 1.7 million in just a few years. And it changed everything. But the way that you had to do that was you had to build a training center. I'm in Redding, California. If you look on a map, it's no place way up north. It has nothing to do with beaches, nothing to do with Los Angeles, nothing to do with San Francisco. It's a little tiny community way up north. It's not, as Sean's on here from Wairika, it's not as small as Wairika. He's even further north. So I couldn't send people out to the center in Indianapolis. We couldn't send everybody out there whenever we needed to train somebody, and they'd go out there and be trained by somebody else to do it somebody else's way of doing things. So Al's whole thing was, you need to build a training center and you begin to hire and train your own people your way. And the way that you're going to do that is you're going to write your manuals, and those manuals are going to become your curriculum that you're going to use for the framework for your classes. And so to do that, I had to become a good trainer. I had to write the manuals. I had to know the manuals. I had to begin to be able to communicate. And I was not bad at that. I like teaching. I've always liked it. I've been able to speak in front of people for a long time, before Chimneys even. Now, that part wasn't really a problem for me. But if you can't train people, then you're always going to have to do the work yourself, or you're always going to be complaining about how people are doing their work. And that's a never-ending, dry, horrible process that none of us want to, keep having to do over and over and over.
Yeah. And Bob, I've actually sent people from the East Coast actually out to visit you. I can remember sending one client of mine some years ago. I actually took a GoPro camera, walked around. I got a look at your training and all you were doing there back in those days, because he brought that back to me. So I'm making notes as we go through there of what I'm considering your gold nuggets today, Bob. We'll repeat these at the end, but I'm picking up some gold nuggets I want to share. So Cheryl, your turn. Turn your mic on, and your next one is yours for the next bit of gold nugget wisdom here.
Well, Bob, as you, I wasn't born yesterday. Let's just put it that way. And I've flown by the seat of my pants more than I want to totally admit. So is there any point, I'm hoping this is a simple question, but is there any point in your life that you may have wished you had taken a separate path than where you're at now? I know you're happy where you're at, but was there a path that you would have chosen different if you could go back and begin?
No. For the person that I was and the personality that I had, I walked the path that I needed to walk, and with its ups or downs. Probably if there was, again, if I talked to my younger self, I would say, learn something about money and money management. I could have done that better, and I would probably be in a better position today. When what Jerry was asking about hiring coaches, I did that when I was 57, and I was looking at the future. Marina and I were talking and going, what are we going to do when I can't or shouldn't climb on roofs anymore? The day is coming. Everybody out there, I don't care how old you are, that day is coming. And a lot of guys find out the day after the last day that they should have climbed on a roof. There's just, we lose strength, we lose balance. It's not a big secret. So what are we going to do? And the only thing to do, you either sell your business as a little tiny business and that's it, and you go work at Home Depot or something, or you build a larger business that can absorb you as overhead, and you manage it, and you have to become a manager, and that means dealing with money and everything's then about how you handle your money. So it took us a while to get there and to go through that. And of course, I've sold my business now and semi-retired. And I would go back, Cheryl, the other thing that I had, because I flew by the seat of my pants, I was never confident that I really knew what I was doing, or if somebody really pressed me, I would prove that I was an idiot. And I would say I'd go back and tell myself to believe in myself, to really believe my gut feelings, the things that I did. I built a good life. I got a good woman. My children love each other and they love us. We have a very, very close family, and we intentionally built that. That was not by accident. And I would never trade that. I would just never trade that for anything. There's no amount of money. You guys know we've gone through 2 deaths this year. And I would not trade those relationships for anything. I'd live in a tent if I could have them back. It would matter not at all. So but managing the money is important. If you're going to run a business, the whole way you keep score is on money. And if you don't have enough money, and you go out of business, you have now created the worst customer service that there is. You could be the best chimney sweep or business person that ever lived, and you're out of business, and nobody can take advantage of your skills and knowledge because you have terrible customer service, and that stemmed from not knowing how to manage your business. So I needed to learn that, and I wish I had learned that sooner.
Okay. So another gold nugget, Bob. I'm making notes as you go through there because you're really spelling out some wisdom for people to think about. So Brandy, you're up next. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, and having the honor of having dinner with your family, with your kids, with your grandkids, I can attest that you have raised some very, very amazing people. And my husband and I all the time think about, that time and how great your kids turned out, and just hope mine can turn out half as good. But my question would be, you were talking about the processes and the manuals, and I guarantee there's somebody watching this show right now that would say, but Bob, I don't have the time. I don't have the time to do that. What would you tell them?
Okay, let's do it like AA. You just haven't hit bottom hard enough yet. I don't know how many of you have ever lost money, but I lost money several times over my career. And that means I worked in a whole entire year in order to pay money. It's stupid. And I did it. And it's a normal small businessman thing. You come up short towards the end of the year, and you may have spent the money. I spent a lot of money in order to not have to pay taxes. I could get the write-offs instead. And it was great for immediate gratification, but not so good for long-range planning. So we have to deal with that part of our life. And it may be the part that we don't like. We like going out and fixing things. We like to turn the wrenches and sweep the chimneys and climb on the roofs and sell stuff to customers. But to go and do the bookkeeping and understand accounting and know how to read our financials, that's just not all that interesting. But it's part of who you have chosen to be. And I think that that's a really, really important thing to do. And the other side of that, I would have hired a coach. I would tell myself to hire a coach earlier. Now, I didn't know any coaches. I didn't know, there wasn't a lot of that around, say in 1991. I wouldn't have known who to call. And by my personality, I may not have even listened to anybody during that time. I may have just been too insecure to admit that I really, really needed help. So that insecurity is part of what I was saying as far as belief in myself goes. Pay attention to that, know when you need help, and then go get it.
Yeah. Bob, one of the things is you've taken a course that a lot of people do, which is you were in the industry and then you decided to join a mixed group. And a mixed group is a management information exchange system. And this is where you go and you meet with other business owners, and you went kind of through the cycle as people should. And in fact, Hope Stevenson and I have had many talks about this, that a mixed group is not a long range 20 and 30 years. You should go into a mixed group for about 2 years, 3 years, see what's going on, and then you move into one-on-one coaching a lot. Or we have people that are in group coaching that will probably move into one-on-one at some point. But what was the deciding factor back 15 years ago, when you decided to join a mixed group and go to these meetings with people that you probably didn't even know that well? You may have known a few of them, but I'm sure you went to your first meeting. There were people there that you had no idea who they were. So what was that pain point that drove you to say, okay, I'm going to get on a plane in Redding, California. And if anybody knows anything about Redding, you're not going to get a whole lot of direct flights from Redding, California to anywhere besides San Francisco, probably, because I know when you travel, it is like watching a travel log of stop. You're going to be in Chicago. I'm going to Boston. I may eventually get there, but for you to get to the East Coast, ain't exactly real easy. So what drove you? What was the pain point that drove you to join that initial mixed group?
I had a family to, by the time I joined the mixed group, actually, my children were out of college. So I'd already gone through paying college. I paid out-of-state tuition. I paid private university tuition. And I had no money to do that. It wasn't saved up or anything. It was just like my daughter would call, and she ended up scholarshiped, but she had 5 scholarship offers. Let me throw this out there. My daughter had 5 scholarship offers for gymnastics in universities, all of which were Division II. And she went up to Oregon State, which was at that time 5th in the nation, Division I. And she decided, they said, well, you can come here, but you're not really good enough to compete. You could be on the team. There's some great ladies, and maybe by your senior year, you can get in some meets. And she decided she wanted to go to the school that said she couldn't do it. And I said, don't make your choice based on money. I don't care what you study. I don't care anything. I care that you come out with faith, that you come out with love, and let's just find out how God can supply for us. And man, it was crazy. It was crazy hard. I was paying out-of-state tuition. She'd call me up in March, my slowest time of year, and go, I tried to register for school today and I couldn't because you haven't paid the bill yet. And then I'd scramble and I had told her, in 10 years, I won't know where I spent the money. It might as well go and be invested in you. And that was true. It turned out to be true. But I was tired of living that way. I just got tired of always having to come up with money at the last minute, of big bills, of knowing that I didn't have any plan for the future, and that I really didn't know what I was doing as a businessman. And I proved it. I proved it over and over and over that I really didn't know what I was doing. And I needed help. And a mixed group at that point was perfect. And there was some smart people in that mixed group and who really, really helped me. Unfortunately, that's what happens a lot in a mixed group. Somebody gets more advanced than the others, and then they are not really benefiting from it. When hope comes in and moderates, well, now you've got somebody, who doesn't need the group to help them. At the time that I was in, we were kind of a self-help group.
Yeah, I understand. So it was pain that drove you there, the pain, and you wanted to make a change, and you saw this as a way out. So I understand that completely. So Cheryl, your turn.
Yeah, you just amaze me. And I admire the fact of where you've taken your family to, the way that, as Brandy said, she had dinner with you. She knows what close-knit they are. Do you notice your family having that contact with the world that you had?
Absolutely. I mean, I ran my business based on relationships. And that's a weakness in terms of money, but it was a benefit in terms of both our employees, their care for me, for my family, for our business, and I care for them. And we demonstrated that. And I would always feel that it was my role as a business owner to prove to my employees that I was for them before I asked them to prove that they were for me. And it's a relational thing, so you're not always doing it perfectly, but we really strove for that. And with our customers, the same thing, that we really, really, really were after their best interest first. And our profit motive would be within that. They're not mutually exclusive. Sometimes I ran my business as though they were, but as I learned, they weren't exclusive, that I could build relationships with customers. And I was a pastor at one time for about 14 years in a little teeny church up in the mountains. And we never felt like we were the real guys. We always thought that the real guys were the big churches down in town. And I'd go to pastor conferences and nobody would talk to me. They'd come up and go, well, where did you graduate? And I go, Washington. And they go, oh, Washington State. And I said, no, Washington High. And that was after I finished there, after I'd gotten kicked out of high school. So it wasn't really much. And they would just turn their back and walk away. And I had other ones where I'd be in a seminar and found out that nobody had supportive relationships within their churches. And I think we could go to a lot of business leaders and ask them, how many of you can share your heart with your employees, that they know what you're going through, they know the state of the business, that they know that you're honest and clear with them, and you're free to share that and even to fail in front of them. And most of us have a hard time doing that. But I think that that opens up that relationship with our employees, with our customers, to just have that kind of honesty. It can be hard to carry. Our little church ended up being a really, really close fellowship, something that when we did go down, ultimately moved away and went to the real churches, we went, oh, crap. Look at what we lost. We didn't even know we had it. And so someplace in there, I think relationships were a really, really prime motivator for me.
Okay. So, Randy, your turn.
Well, I want to make sure you wrote down about the don't make your decision based on money, Jerry.
Don't. I got down here. You better know money. You better know about money.
And then about proving yourself to your employees before you ask them to prove to you.
That's a good one. I got it down.
Okay, perfect. So I know Marina, at least in the later years, by the time I got into the industry, was helping in your office. Did she always help in the office, or did she have a career, or did she stay home with the kids? What did that look like?
So the way we had started our life, and I'm not sure that I would do this again, but it was important for us, for her to be home. And so we lived on a single income for forever. And she did eventually start working in the office. I fired her. Once she became a grandma, she had decided, well, that's more important. And so we'd always end up having these fights at home, about, well, did you get that money? Did you do collections? No, Melody showed up and I held her and played with her. And, we're just like, okay, that's what's important to you. Let me hire somebody. I'm going to bring somebody else in. And I did. And I should have done that. I mean, if I did anything over, I would hire an office person, number one, first, right off. And I would have done that the first day I was in business. I should have done it, except for I started my business on $60, and I had my leg in a splint, and I had bought a ladder, and I had a used vacuum that didn't have a filter in it, but I didn't know it. So it was a very inauspicious start. I did have to do a 12 and 12 pitch roof like that. So I did know about roping up at that point, even with my leg in a splint. But I should have hired somebody in the office at that point rather than a helper to help me on a roof. So Marina worked in the office, and then she didn't work in the office. And then she worked outside of our business, and then she came back later and did work again, and it worked out great the second time around.
Okay. So, Bob, here's my next question. In the last 5 to 10 years, there has become a big look at safety within the chimney service industry. Okay. 10 years ago, we weren't talking it due to fatalities and bad things happening. This has brought it to the forefront, as you and I both know. And now you're actively, in fact, that's the semi-retired part. You're still doing training and going out and doing this for people. In fact, you're a member of our team here at CVC Success Group. But it had to be, you climbed mountains. That's where you actually learned ropes at, was climbing mountains, rock climbing, all these different things you did. But was there something in your life that happened to you that made you aware how important your safety was to you, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's actually within the full industry. It wasn't just that some people fell and there was fatalities and things like that. Obviously, if that happens to you, then it's important to you for that reason. But most of us, it happened to somebody else. And so it probably won't happen to us. And I don't know that most of us make our choices based on somebody else having gotten hurt. There's probably are really smart people who do, but if you're like me, you probably don't. And but once you start getting employees, that's when it starts changing. It changed for me with that. Now I've got people that don't have a climbing background. They don't understand safety the same way I do. They don't approach it the way that I would. They can't see the larger context in the same with the systems that I understood with ropes. And most of the chimney sweeps that I knew had started as firemen, so they were using ladders and ridge hooks. I used ropes because that's what I knew. And like my son Hosh, when he came to work for me, he was scared of heights. He didn't like climbing up there. Once he learned how to use the ropes and harness and trust them, he had no problem whatsoever. Once you feel safe, you can do your job without. It really is about getting your job done well because you feel secure. So it was employees that was that motivating factor that I really needed to keep them safe. Not so much because OSHA would. Excuse me. If you're doing it so that OSHA won't get you, I think your motivations are wrong. We should do it because we don't want people to get hurt. And we want them to get home to their family. And we want them to feel successful and secure every day that they get up to go to their job. And so therefore, we put in systems in place that they can use practically on the job every day to keep them from getting hurt.
Yeah. And, I just finished recording a safety seminar. You actually were one of the people that reviewed that, and we're putting together a manual from that per your suggestion, where I've got the entire session sent to a transcriptionist where they're going to transcribe it. Then we'll edit it into an actual manual. And that was part of your suggestion also, to turn this not just into a training, but into a actual manual for people to follow. Even though describe it like you did, writing manuals is kind of like hot daggers in your eyes, is the way you described you went through with that. So Cheryl, what's your next one? I'm racking up the gold nuggets here, Brandy. Make sure you get your notes in case I miss any, okay? So Cheryl, all up to you.
You brought up in that conversation where I was going to go next, and that was with a child in the business. They're not children, but a young man in the business. Both of my children are in my business. And was that easy for you to transform him into the business, or was it kind of like it would have been easier not to have a child in there?
For us, it was easy. So my dad was an entrepreneur, right? He owned 5 liquor stores, a car dealership at one time. There was a lot going on, and him and I could not work together no matter what. We could not. There's no way. and my other children, probably the same things. We'd butt heads and want to do things differently. But with Hosh, it wasn't like that. We clicked. It was seamless. There was we really had a deep, peaceful relationship, such that customers would call and say, I don't know what's going on, but that tech and calling into the office was just different from any experience I've had with anybody else. You could tell that there was love there. And so we really didn't have a problem, but it really depends on the personality of each child and your own. It can be really good or it could be horrible.
Okay. Cheryl, that answer your question?
It did. I just know that there's people out there that have children coming into their business, and I wanted to see if yours was like mine. It can either have its good aspects for one and a different aspect for another.
Right.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
I want to ask a question in relationship to what Cheryl just asked you. There became a time that Hosh left your business and went to work for Copperfield. What was that like for you, Bob, when you had what you had planned up to this point all of a sudden went awry?
Well, it wasn't that sudden. Originally we had it written into our trust for Haas to take over the corporation. It was his job. He was groomed to lead it and to manage, and he was a good manager. But really, he and his wife Lisa, as their children got older, their vision for their life really wasn't running our company as a chimney sweeps. It was something else that they wanted to go and do. And when Copperfields came along, and I know there was a thread on Facebook about headhunting at conventions, and Copperfields headhunted him, not in a bad way. I don't mean that in a bad way. They were very gracious about it. They said, look, if it's going to disrupt your family, we don't want you. So you guys need to have that conversation. And he came in and he was upset because he was my right arm. And he said, man, I've been offered a job. And I said, well, let's look at it. And we looked at it and I just go, well, I think it's time for you to take it. I think that's what you need. You don't need to worry about me. I'm a survivor. And if this is what's right for you, you need to go do that. And then I need to do what's my next step, whatever that turns out to be. And so it was good. It was, you sort of have these dreams. You got this business and you want your child maybe to be involved in it and be successful in it. And you see that legacy passed down that way. But that's not really where they were going. It's not what they wanted. They wanted to move to Portland, and Copperfield was going to allow that to happen. Their daughters were already up there living. My daughter is right across the river in Vancouver, and they're very close. And that's what they wanted to do, and that ultimately that's what they did. So it wasn't what we first envisioned as a dream, but we adjusted it to what was best for their dream and for what they wanted. And I think that's not only what we should do for our own children in a business, but all of our employees. What are their dreams and how can we help them achieve them?
That's great. So Brandy, hey, guess what? Our time's drawing close. So this is going to be your last shot. So pick your best one out, Brandy.
It's a good one, and it's a two-part since you took my turn, Jerry.
No, you were this was your
I
last.
don't want to hear it. Bob, a lot of people when they go into retirement or semi-retirement, they write a book. And so I would like to know when the book about Bob Ferrari's life is coming out, and then also will it include why you were kicked out of high school?
Oh, heck yeah, it would have that. Yeah, I've thought about writing. I actually, I've never written anything long like a book. I've written magazine articles and some poetry and things like that, that sometimes I have to be in a specific mental space to write well. And as part of me enjoys it, but part of me would rather go out and ride my mountain bike or go skiing. And that's the problem I have. But yeah, I got kicked out of high school because I had a 0.3 average my junior year, which is all F's and 1 D. I managed to get a D in PE. So it's challenging. You go try to do that. See if you can fail that bad. And it was a high school my dad had gone to, and so there was a lot of family bad stuff going on. It was not a good time of my life. On the other hand, at the end of that year, I got kicked out, but I went to a ski race camp up in Canada that changed my life. And I rock climbed there for the first time. And what I experienced there, I was this kid who was a screw up. I had everything wrong with me. I was doing things wrong. I had everybody was saying what a loser I was. And when I got to that rock and I was standing at the bottom, and here's the problem to get up, here's a rope to catch you if you fall, and a group of people at the bottom that were encouraging. They were saying, you can do this, you can go for it, go ahead, do it. And when I pulled up over the top, I felt so good. And I think I spent many years after that searching for that same feel of community, of people who would support each other, who would care for each other, and be encouraging. It's easy to criticize. It's hard to encourage, and especially if you don't really see it. Has that got that?
I told Jerry, write that down.
I got it.
Okay, because see, Jerry's already writing part of your book for you.
Well, that's it. And don't let her give you a hard time about writing a book. If she goes there, just turn that one right back at her and ask her when hers is coming out. That I've been.
When I retire.
Yeah.
Okay, so Cheryl, let's go back to you. Last shot. Give me one more.
Bob, if you could tell the people out there, especially the younger people, I know money's important, but I hear a lot of different things coming out from you other than money being the important part. Can you give us that statement that would help our children and our grandchildren succeed just in their normal life, not particularly business?
Oh boy. Well, what really matters? And you don't always know how much something matters till you lose it. Whatever it is, it can be a relationship, it can be a person, it can be a business. I would say on the one hand, probably to be real, to just be who you really are. And that takes some self-introspection. You can't get that from other people. You have to know that. And I think that if you want to be successful, be real. No matter who you are, you know, if you're a bean counter type of person that needs all the details, be a bean counter type of person that needs all the details and say so. And if you're the risk taker who doesn't care and doesn't want all the details, be that. And then figure out how to do that together. Because that's the important thing then, is to be able to do that with others. You can't build anything in life without other people. And nobody is going to be just like you, or it'd be a really, really boring world. And so figuring that out, knowing who you are, and then listening and understanding who they are, and helping people to be who they really, really are, I think is the most important thing.
Thank
Okay,
you for
Brandy.
those words.
Yeah, Brandy, I'm gonna give you another turn since you said I robbed yours.
No,
So take
it's
one more.
okay. No, it's
No.
okay, because I think mine was a good ending point. I would just make a comment that I love what Bob just said, because I always talk about, you know, being authentic and making sure that you're living authentically and don't apologize for it. So
No.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, Bob, you're a person, to be honest with you, I've heard you speak. You speak with beautiful words. I'm very serious. I can remember a time watching you at Aileron on a stage, and you had a knapsack kind of with you, and you were actually throwing clothes out of the knapsack, and you were making a case about why you didn't need so many things in your life and how sometimes things weren't important. But I also know how much time you spend putting your words together. I've watched you actually prepare for presentations, and I know how much you put into it. So these are the gold nuggets. Brandy, listen carefully, Cheryl, in case I miss anything here. Okay, so these are the gold nuggets I picked up, which Bob Ferrari would tell his younger self as he could. Number one, keep your employees safe. I caught that one big in there. Number two, hire an office person. Okay, that would be your first person. Number three, okay, proving yourself to your employees instead of expecting your employees to prove themselves to yours. Next one is run your business based on relationships. The next one is you better know about money. Next one, you need more than peer counseling. The importance of manuals. And so everybody's aware, Bob's former coach, Al Levy, has actually written manuals. And Bob, would you have bought those manuals instead of writing them years ago and them daggers in your eyes from Al?
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So back then, and now Al sells a package, but the package is similar to how he coached me through that. And that is, it's easier to rewrite something than it is to make it up from scratch. And so you could take an electrician's manual and adapt it to your chimney sweep business. You throw out what you don't need. Remember something that you do need, and you write it in there. And that's what he had me do. And it was still like having white hot needles stuck in my eyes.
Right. So if you're listening and interested in Al's manuals, if you will email me, I will put you in touch with Al. That way you can talk to Al about his manuals and all that. Here's the next one, Bob. You must become a trainer of your people. The next one, believe in yourself. The next one, hire a coach. The next one is coming to the realization that your children may have a different vision than you do for their lives. Next one, Bob needs to write a book. Okay. Next one, do not let negative people hold you back. And the last one is be real, know who you are. So, Brandy, did you pick up anything else in this hour that you feel was a gold nugget in here?
You covered all the ones that I had written down. I would just say Bob's inspired me because as everyone knows, Jeremy is the numbers guy in our business. I am not the numbers person, but I know that I need to learn them. So I'm going to take Bob's advice and hit rock bottom and just admit right now that I'm powerless over knowing our financials.
You hired somebody who could do it. You don't have to do it. Just get the guy.
Okay. So there's a couple people have asked about the safety manual we're putting together. So everybody's aware this will be in a download that will be on the CVC virtual platform. So if you're a subscriber to the platform, you'll have access. We just released that 4-hour safety course today, and the manual is at the transcriptionist now being changed from spoken words into written words, and then they'll have to go through the editing process. And again, if you'd like Al Levy's information, just send it to my address, send it to my email, and I will tell you that I have seen that Al's package is thousands and thousands of hours of work. And Bob, it took a lot of time to put it together. In fact, some of Bob's stuff is in there in those manuals. So Cheryl, what about you? Is there anything I have missed in my review of the Gold Nuggets?
He didn't put the words directly like this, but basically be true to yourself.
Okay, good. So Brandy, usually I close out with my words, but I'd like to know what do you leave here with this hour that you've invested, and what does this kind of what's your thoughts process? Because we were all three looking forward to this in the last couple of days.
Well, and I like this because a lot of the things we do are extremely business related. And I like because today had business in it, absolutely, but it was always also very inspirational and very true to just real life. And so I would just encourage our listeners that are out there to, listen to this, maybe listen to it a couple of times and just really pick up those gold nuggets and take that advice that Bob gave. And thank you so much, Bob, for giving us your time today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cheryl, what about you? Is there anything that you would pull out of this that has been significant for you today?
I've lived a long life, as some of us on here have. And we've all had those good days and we've had the bad days. And Bob has pulled out wisdom here that's good for Brandy's kids, which are still small, all the way up to people like me. And so it's hard for a man to take his soul and lay it out on a piece of paper. But Bob, I see you do it so well. And I do want to thank you.
Yeah. And I think to what Terry's just said is appreciate the people in your life because you don't know when they're gone. And we can all, and Bob, that's definitely something that I know you can definitely agree with right there. And we all can as we go through our losses in life. So Terry, I appreciate that. So if you feel like this broadcast was of value to you, keep in mind, the reason we do this broadcast each and every week is to share gold nuggets like we've shared today to help you with your life, where you're going, to help you build up where you want to go. And Bob, like I said, when I started this, like I said, definitely if you listen to Bob, yes, he is probably the most interesting man in the chimney service industry when you look at it. I still remember the first time John Meredith said that, and when he said it, I think about the guy in the beer commercial when he says that. It's like trying to put it together. But Bob, you've had a good life. You know, you've got a super family. From what I've seen from my side, I can still remember going to Gold Coast, Oregon, and teaching a class, and Hosh was in that class. You were there, Marina, and I believe your daughter-in-law was in that class at the same time, if I remember correctly. And then I saw Hosh when he came to Lake Murray a couple years ago to the gathering there. He walked up to me and said, "You don't remember me? I'm Hosh Ferrari." I said, "Yeah, man, couldn't forget you." So anyway, but Bob, I want to really appreciate you taking this time out today for sharing these gold nuggets, these words of wisdom with us that you've shared today. And this is the conclusion of this episode of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. It's sponsored by the CBC Success Group. Let us know if we can help you take your business dreams and help you turn them into your business realities. And with that, we'll see you next week. Tune us in next week. We got another super show all about it, and we will talk to you later. And I'm going to hit the button, and we may sit here for just a second and look like idiots because we don't know exactly when it'll cut off. So I'm just going to keep talking until maybe it stops here and it don't look so stupid this time.